This is TWiT.
So this is relevant to the App Store. And this is I think this is a problem, but I want to know what you think. I think this is a problem when you say, as Apple has, no, we are going to be the sole one and only source of apps on the iPhone and the iPad. We are going to vet all the apps. That's fine in the context it's been in, but now you're in China, and the laws of China are changing. They're going to change in Russia. In fact, they just changed in Russia. In February, VPNs will be illegal in China. They are already illegal in Russia. And now, because you're the one and only App Store, Apple's in this position. They have removed all the VPN apps from the App Store in China, preparing for this new law in February. I think that they've been put in an awkward position. I think there is a solution for Apple, which is to open up apps, iPhone for side loading. But maybe it's too late to do that. That would be such an obvious thing.
Yeah. No, this is one area where I think that Apple has a moral obligation to. I'm sure that there were the discussions internal. I'm sure that they were really sweating this out. But the power of a government to control its people through denying it access to VPN, encryption, and anonymity. It starts off with, isn't it kind of a nasty thing that the government is doing this? But also, it's when you're talking about a country like Russia where journalists get killed. Not they get harassed, not that, hey, they want to, there's an investigation going on, we'd like to have access to a phone. Journalists straight on get killed. And these people need to have the ability to speak privately with one another to avoid getting murdered by their own government. You have even worse governments in Turkey where, again, they will, it's not even, oh, well, gosh, this person was found hanged in a prison cell, or gosh, they were beaten by 18 different blunt instruments and we were going to rule this as suicide. In Turkey, you have journalists who are getting arrested and then killed. And you have political dissidents who are getting disappeared and killed. And Apple, I hope that I'm not overstating this. I hope I'm not making this sound like hyperbole, but Apple has to decide what side of this argument they are on. If it doesn't matter, if it means, I think that in China, it's unfortunate, but they're not noted for the same sort of stuff that's going on other places in the world. But they're just going to have to, at some point, they're going to have to be face the press and say that, well, yes, we decided to not play along with this small government that doesn't have a whole lot of power over us, where it's not a big market, but we decided that when this huge opportunity of this huge market opened up for us, we don't want to risk losing access to that market. So I have deep problems with Apple agreeing to to turn off what can be life-saving apps for a great number of people that have very, very little power in the countries in which they've chosen to live.
So I agree entirely with Andy in terms of the moral side, but from a practical standpoint, if this is the law of the land,
no, they have
do
no
they
choice.
have a choice?
But this is the slippery slope that you create by saying only through us can you get an app. Now Apple, and this is the
precisely.
Yeah, this is the email they sent to one of the VPN apps. This is ExpressVPN. We're ready to notify your application will be removed from the China App Store because it includes content that is illegal in China. Once you're doing business in China. And by the way, it's not going to just be China. It will be Russia in November. It will be Venezuela. It will be Poland. We're seeing authoritarian. It will be Turkey. Authoritarian regimes emerge all over the world, and Apple is going to have to agree to do what each one of these regimes says.
Yes, they will, and because it is the law of the land. Apple is not a government. It is not a military. It can't go in and say we're going to just ignore the law of the land.
No, Google didn't either. Google left. They just left China. They left the market.
They can say that we're not going to participate. We're not going to have an app store in China then. Right. We are close to being valued as a $1 trillion company. China is a huge market, let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Turkey, where it's not maybe quite so.
Or do what Android does, where it's side loading. They allow side loading, and you could always do it.
I'm saying that they don't have the option of violating the law of the land, but they do have the free and open choice not to do business in a land that is making them do stuff that, if in their estimation, is going to lead to people getting killed, getting murdered. Again, for me, VPN is I'm in a coffee shop and I don't want my password being jacked by some kid. In other parts, it's you will be killed. If people know who you're talking about, the people that you're talking to will be killed. This is a serious problem. And Apple, at the very minimum, needs to speak about, let's walk us through why you decided that playing along with this as a broad principle is an okay choice. And is this compatible or incompatible with that hippie, touchy-feely, peace, love, dope? Oh, we're here to improve the world, improve things for humans everywhere. And again, if people are getting killed because of access to software or lack of access to software, they at least need to not be tone deaf and say, here is how we don't feel as though we are being hypocrites in saying this. I'm not saying they are being hypocrites right now, but I'm saying that at the scale at which they operate, they can't simply send notices to developers saying, oh, by the way, we're pulling your VPN apps. They have to speak at a very high level about what this problem is for them and how they intend to navigate it. Because what if the next thing that Russia does says, oh, by the way, we passed a law that says that you can't have a phone with any encryption on it, and we have to be able to have on-the-fly, unannounced backdoors into it.
It's probably going to happen in Australia and England. I mean, that's just around the corner.
Yeah. Apple has to have a policy, and Apple has to state that policy.
So Google does not have a Play Store in China at all. Google doesn't play in China because, remember, Google was asked by the Chinese government to censor, results of its search, and Google, instead of doing it, said no. We're going to redirect all Google.cn searches to Hong Kong or Singapore, and we're just not going to do business in China. But if you have an Android phone in China, and many do, you can download there are other stores, and you can download, for instance, a free browser from the not-for-profit group Great Fire that has a VPN built into it. So, I mean, there are alternatives in China, but it's a very difficult position that Apple's in. I'm not
terribly
hard.
That. But here's a question that I have also, which is that we're talking about apps in the App Store right now. But let's face it, Apple is tremendously reliant on China to build iPhones and iPads and Macs. And
it wouldn't necessarily just be leaving this iPhone sales behind. It might be leaving iPhone manufacture behind.
Right. I mean, it seems to me that this is again, I agree entirely with Andy that this is Apple needs to be totally upfront about why they're doing what they're doing and what the situation is, because it is hugely problematic. But at the same time, they do not have an easy option. Even with side loading, potentially, they could be, by allowing the side loading, they could be breaking Chinese law.
I agree. People may not remember, but in January, Apple removed the New York Times from its App Store in China.
Dangerous stuff.
I agree. I agree. The stuff isn't easy, but as parents teach their children, morality and ethics are what you do when the right answer is by far the hardest one.
Yeah, that's right. When it's easy, that's no big deal.